Hey everybody, I'm Alistair Stevens, and this is This Week on Point North Media. We're going to discuss everything that's coming up in the coming week here, but first of all, an important welcome to the most wonderful time of the year. Happy Star Wars Week, everybody, or is that Merry Star Wars Week? I can never remember which way around that goes, and sometimes it's different. You know, as you cross the Atlantic from Britain to the United States, I just can't keep up with the conventions of the season, but hey, either way, it's Star Wars Week. The Last Jedi is released this week, and I am going to go and see it on Friday morning. It's going to be pretty great. I'm going to go and see it on Friday morning, and then again, possibly Saturday afternoon, possibly Sunday morning. We're going to see how the schedule works out, but I'm going to go and see it, and we're going to have some thoughts, and it's going to be pretty exciting. I cannot wait. And we're going to begin our Star Wars celebrations, in fact, this coming Wednesday evening at 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central. We are going to do, all of us together, a live commentary track for The Force Awakens. We're going to watch The Force Awakens together, and I'm going to talk all over it while you guys chat in the YouTube chat. I say YouTube because, of course, Crowdcast doesn't allow us to go more than 2 hours on a single live session, so we have to move this over to YouTube. Not quite as comfortable, but hey, at least we could be there for the whole duration. So that show is actually going to start at 8:30 Eastern, 7:30 Central. We're going to do a little pre-show just to warm up. We're going to talk a little about the state of the Star Wars universe. We're going to talk a little about what we expect from The Last Jedi. Maybe watch the complete trailer suite for The Last Jedi. Get excited about that. And then we'll go into our discussion of The Force Awakens at 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central. That is this coming Wednesday, December the 13th. I really cannot wait. It is so very much Star Wars season once again. I'm so excited for the new movie. The initial response from the fans and the critics who have seen The Last Jedi following the preview showing last weekend is incredibly positive, like really surprisingly positive, and doesn't carry with it any of that equivocation that you oftentimes get from people coming out of a preview screening where they're like, well, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a wonderful movie, but no kind of definitive pseudo-objective critique. There's none of that this time around. This time we're just getting a rush of warmth and positivity. It is a good time to be a Star Wars fan, you guys, and I am very, very excited for what comes next. But that is not all that is happening this week on Point North Media. We begin our full slate of shows tomorrow evening at 10 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Central, our usual kind of evening time for our live sessions, with the 35th session of Dear Mr. Potter, Light Defeats the Dark, in which we discuss chapters 7 and 8 of Ursula K. Le Guin's A Wizard of Earthsea. We go, in a sense, back to the beginning. We circle back around to some of the characters we met very early in the book, some of the essential conflicts that we met early in the book, and of course we return to the root of Ged's character. We kind of delve deep into his truly horrifying adolescent arrogance, and we resolve some of those issues, and we learn a little more about the working of the world too, specifically that conflict that we've been discussing throughout this series of Dear Mr. Potter about what magic is and the degree to which magic, the type of magic that Ged studies, the type of magic that is taught at the wizard school on Roke, to what degree that type of magic is all that there is in the world, and to what degree it is just a fraction of a greater kind of power. We're going to get a really interesting perspective on that this week as we return to, we get tangled up again with Surratt and end up back with Agayan again as we began the book. So I'm really looking forward to that discussion. That is tomorrow evening. That is Tuesday, December the 12th at 10 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Central. Dear Mr. Potter 35, Light Defeats the Dark. Then Wednesday evening, The Force Awakens commentary, as previously discussed. Thursday evening, there and back again at number 44, Gibbets and Crows. We are going to talk about the casting down of Saruman. We're going to talk about the final confrontation at Isengard. There's a lot of material there, a lot of conversations with Treebeard, a lot of conversations with Saruman. Theoden gets one of my favorite speeches in the entire book, and ultimately we will, of course, break Saruman's staff and move toward the final resolution of Book 3 of The Two Towers. For some reason, I should say, I think it was Katie over on Twitter who brought my attention to the fact that the production schedule was somewhat misaligned. The calendar, the live broadcast calendar was right, but the production schedule that I put together, gosh, almost a year ago now for There and Back Again, is actually wrong because I was missing the last session in The Two Towers, or in Book 3 of The Two Towers, I should say. So this week we're doing chapters 9 and 10 of The Two Towers. Then next week we're going to conclude our discussion of Book 3 with chapter 11 of Book 3 of The Two Towers and a little wrap-up Q&A. We're going to talk about the Palantir next week. So that's going to wrap up Book 3 just in time for Christmas. It's really nice how everything has just kind of fallen into place. We're going to finish A Wizard of Earthsea next week. We're going to finish Book 3 of The Two Towers next week. We're going to finish our discussion of our Patreon exclusive book club discussion of Murder on the Orient Express next week. Technically, we're going to finish that this week. We're going to do that on Friday evening at 10 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Central. We're going to wrap up part 3, the Hercule Poirot sits back and deduces the entire mystery from first principles part of that book, which is really great. The movement of the story there is just beautiful, and the final revelation when it comes, of course, if you've read ahead and you know what happens in Murder on the Orient Express, is just unprecedented. It's just a thing of intricate and arcane beauty. So we're going to talk all about that this week. We're going to finish the novel. Then next week, we're going to talk about the recent Kenneth Branagh, Daisy Ridley adaptation of Murder on the Orient Express, which I still haven't seen. Luckily, there is a movie theater here in the city that is still playing Murder on the Orient Express. So I'm going to go and see that, I think, Wednesday morning. I'm going to go and see that. So I'm going to do the unprecedented thing. Unprecedented, not for many people, I'm sure, but unprecedented for me, of going to the movie theater 3 times in 5 days. I think that's how that's going to work. I'm going to go see Orient Express on Wednesday, see The Last Jedi on Friday, and then see The Last Jedi again probably Sunday morning. So there will also be some story and Star Wars thoughts on The Last Jedi, hopefully before Christmas. I think I'm going to be able to sit down and turn that around pretty quick. Then I should just say next week, for those of you who haven't been keeping up with the calendar, which you can find over at pointnorthmedia.com, there will be a special one-shot on Wednesday evening. That will be what? Wednesday the 20th? Let me just confirm that date there. Yes, the evening of Wednesday the 20th, I will be doing a one-shot on Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, because I'm going to read A Christmas Carol to you between Christmas and New Year, basically every day. Starting that Tuesday, starting Boxing Day, I guess, I'm going to read one stave per day of A Christmas Carol, which is just, one of my favorite books. It's just an extraordinary piece of work, and it's one of those pieces of work which rewards a careful examination and a kind of exegetical study of the text more than any other that I can think of. It's just extraordinary. So I'm going to do a one-shot of that next week, where I'm probably going to talk about some of the big adaptations. There have been a few adaptations of A Christmas Carol. Sadly, only one of them with Muppets. Sadly, only one of them with Bill Murray. But we're gonna look at that anyway. I definitely need to watch Scrooged again this week too. So stay tuned for some thoughts on that. Maybe a little impromptu live tweet of Scrooged as I return to that movie for the first time in 10, 12 years, something like that. So we're going to delve into A Christmas Carol, how the story works, what Dickens' original intention was, the degree to which A Christmas Carol defined the Victorian notion of Christmas, which is astonishing. The influence of this story is just remarkable. So all of this is to say, we're covering all of that next week. If you haven't yet read A Christmas Carol this holiday season, go pick it up. Go read it. You can read it in a very short span of time. It takes maybe like 3.5 to 4 hours to read the whole thing aloud, which is what I'm going to be doing that week between Christmas and New Year. But if you're sitting and reading, you can get through it in 2.5, 3 hours maybe. It's just fantastic. And there are free versions out there. There are audiobook versions out there. There are full cast play versions out there, dramatized readings out there. There are versions with amazing original music that you can go and get. So by all means, head on out and pick up your copy of A Christmas Carol so that we can talk about it next week. And then I'll read it to you. Just if you need some escape from, family life, escape from domesticity, escape from the burdens of that weird interregnum between Christmas and New Year, then you'll be able to go plug in your phone or your podcast player of choice and listen to me read you A Christmas Carol. It's not a bad way to close out the year as these things go, I think. Not a bad way at all. And then, of course, right at the beginning of the new year, actually, on New Year's Day, January 1st, 2018, we are going to gather again for one of these sessions, one of these this week / this year on Point North. I think I'm probably going to push that out to an hour. That is going to be about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, maybe 3 o'clock Eastern time, 2 o'clock Central time, something like that on New Year's Day. We're going to get together. We're going to talk about the plans for the week, of course, because then we're going to be moving into book 4 of There and Back, of The Lord of the Rings, in There and Back Again. We're also going to be moving into Goblet of Fire in Dear Mr. Potter, where we're starting our 4th Harry Potter novel to start 2018, and we'll be announcing the new Point North Patreon exclusive book club subject. I don't know what that is yet because you guys haven't voted for it yet because I haven't put the poll up yet. I'm just saying we're all to blame. We're all at fault here in terms of preparing the next subject for the Patreon exclusive Point North Book Club. So all of that will be happening on January 1st. I'll also take the opportunity to talk a little about the schedule for the year, to talk a little about my plans for There and Back Again, to talk about my plans for Dear Mr. Potter, to talk about some possible new shows and some things that I would really like to do if I have the space and the time and the support to do all of those things. So that's going to be a really fun way to ring in the new year, I guess. We can all kind of get over our hangovers in the morning. We can kind of, have our Gatorade and healthy breakfast or whatever it is that we do to compensate for the rigors of the night before. And then around 2 o'clock Central Time, we can sink into the warm embrace of this fine company and talk about what we're going to do in the following year. Let me see here. There's an audio version read by Patrick Stewart, says Art K here in the Crowdcast chat. Yes, the audio version of A Christmas Carol read by Sir Patrick Stewart is extraordinary, and for my money, the definitive version, right? For my money, if you're going to listen to an audio version, make that the audio version. I've had mixed successes with the dramatized versions. There are lots out there that you can go and find, some of which I'm sure are available for free through the BBC iPlayer. You can go and track that down. But I've had mixed responses to those, oftentimes because I feel as though there's something iterative about performances of A Christmas Carol, and this is one of the reasons that I like to go back to the original text every year and read it, because through the process of repeated adaptation, I think that some things are distilled and some things are simply lost. You know, these characters, if you haven't read the original text in a long while or heard the original text in a long while, you might be surprised by how complex some of these characters are, by how thoughtful some of these characters are. You know, Fred is not the caricature that he's often presented as. Bob is not the caricature that he's often presented as. The sequence with Marley is so much worse and more horrifying than you remember it being, if all you've seen are kind of large-scale, somewhat bombastic adaptations. As, of course, the same can be said for the entire fourth stanza. And the fifth stanza is nothing like as saccharine or as simple. The wit of Dickens shines through the original text, and that is something that Patrick Stewart does beautifully, I think, in his reading. Let me see as I come down here. Angela says she's watching Star Wars Rebels this week too. Full Star Wars week. That's very good. I'm very, very glad. Yes. Princess Ostrich says this time slot is perfect for me. Sadly, no seminars between morning and early afternoon Eastern time. I'm sorry. It's just the way it all works out this week. I am a slave to my schedule, as I am so many things. We're going to try and mix that up a little bit next week so that we can have some kind of pre-Christmas kind of more European-friendly time slots. And certainly in the new year, we're going to continue to try and switch these out as best we can. But yeah, it is tough. I'm so sorry that you're not able to make it to the evening sessions. But at least the podcast versions are there after the fact. Do you guys have experience watching the Crowdcast live videos after the fact and going back and kind of keeping up with the conversation? Is that a better experience than the YouTube experience? YouTube drops the chat completely. There is just no stored chat on YouTube, which is not great, honestly, and not necessarily the way that I would want it. The way that I want it is the way that Twitch handles it. I don't know if you guys have spent a lot of time watching twitch.tv streams. It's a platform that is primarily dedicated to the streaming of video games, but their chat is properly time-synced back to the video. So as you watch the video from last week or last month or last year, the chat unfolds in real time as you're watching it, so you get the best of both worlds. That's a really great system. I don't understand. There's clearly a technological solution, right? That technological solution to that intractable problem absolutely exists. I just want that to be taken up by Crowdcast, by YouTube, by everyone who does a live chat, live broadcast kind of format. That would be just fantastic. So I definitely support that. Lynn says, yes, but it doesn't scroll along, so the comments don't always make sense. Yeah, that was my experience too. I wasn't sure if that was just the last time I tried it was when Crowdcast was having that problem with the chat choosing itself when to scroll. The chat knows better than I, so it will scroll when it feels like it. It will sometimes not update at all, and then sometimes when I'm in the middle of reading a comment, it will decide, oh, no, there are 17 new comments, and you have to see them all right now, simultaneously, and we'll scroll along beside it. But yeah, I've had a similar problem with Crowdcast. Crowdcast is continuing to improve and expand its platform, so I'm hopeful that they'll be able to integrate that. Alexa says, I will sometimes do that. There are also timestamps on the conversation. You can click to a chat bubble, and it will jump to that timestamp. That's great. Can you expose that functionality there in the Crowdcast chat? Do you mean here, or do you mean in Twitch? I think Twitch also does a kind of reciprocal hyperlinking thing with chat messages, where you can kind of click on a chat message and jump to that point in the video, which is very helpful. Sometimes the response of the chat is just great. I watch what do I watch on Twitch? I don't actually watch a great deal on Twitch. I watch some streams from the fine folks at Idle Thumbs, which is a video game podcast. A bunch of two of the three people who host Idle Thumbs now, I guess, currently work for Campo Santo, who produced the magnificent video game Firewatch, and have just announced their upcoming spiritual sequel, their successor to Firewatch, In the Valley of the Kings, I think is what it's called. It's an Egyptian archaeology game, which I'm super into. That looks really great. I watched some Waypoint from Vice. I watch their live video streams sometimes, almost never live. In fact, they tend to go live in the morning when I'm hard at work. So I'll generally catch up with those at lunchtime when I have a little break day, and I watch them play, PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, for example, or a bunch of other games too. That's always fun. The wonderful Hope, Biohazard Princess, who you may well follow on Twitter, has just started up a new streaming series where she's playing Skyrim, which is great. Hope is just lovely, so I definitely urge you to do that. I think, in fact, I might be able to, I don't know if I can paste a version of my followers here. No, perhaps not. Okay, but if you go to twitch.tv/pointnorthmedia, now I'm getting streaming audio off of Twitch. Thanks, Twitch. I appreciate that. If you go to twitch.tv/pointnorthmedia, I think you can actually see the list of people that I follow, and there are some excellent people there. So go and watch some fun video game streams. And if you have other excellent video game streams, get in touch and let me know. I know I promised last week that I would do some video game streaming and just completely ran out of time. Here is the situation, okay? Today is very crowded for me. Today is a very, very busy day indeed. The minute that I am done with this, I'm going to go and edit the episode of Excelsior that I recorded last night with Sarah and with Vinton, in which we discussed the 2004 Hellboy movie, which is really fun. Like, not a perfect movie by a long way, and there's a lack of focus, there's a lack of discipline, there are some structural problems, and there's some weird mid-2000s kind of pseudo-progressive, performative, feminist misogyny going on in the middle of that film, which I do not love and which we talk about quite a lot. But we're going to talk about the Hellboy, or we have talked about, and we're going to release a podcast about the Hellboy movie. So I'm going to go and edit that. And here's the situation. I then have a hard out at like 2:30. So if I can edit that podcast very quickly and get it up and get everything done, if it's a nice, easy edit, which it may well be, I might jump in and try streaming some video games for an hour later this afternoon. So if you can head on over to twitch.tv/pointnorthmedia, then you'll be able to follow along there. These are the things that are happening. Becca says, Ron Perlman seems like a fun guy. I've got to tell you, Ron Perlman is the reason that Hellboy is successful. It is, I mean, the fantastic performances, in the rest of the cast. There are fantastic performances in the rest of the cast. John Hurt is surprisingly good as Professor Broom. There's a lot to like. The two low-key Czech actors that they have in that movie, one playing Grigory Rasputin, of course, and the other playing the awful Nazi cyborg Cronin. Those guys are fantastic. There's a real creepy physicality to that movie, which I really love. Guillermo del Toro, of course, could shoot anything, could point a camera at literally anything and make it ethereal and beautiful and disquieting and discordant and yet luminous in its way. So there's just a ton to really, really appreciate about that movie. Doesn't hold up perfectly, but is a solid piece of work. Hellboy 2, genuinely great movie. Like, I really like that. I think that it manages to distill a lot of the problems out of the first one and kind of advance Hellboy 2 from 2008. And of course, we're looking forward to the new Hellboy movie that's coming out next year, starring David Harbour of Stranger Things. Really interesting possibilities for that movie. I'm actually a little unsettled by the fact that they've announced that it's going to be R-rated. I personally don't think that Hellboy as a character works best in an R-rated environment. The thing that I love about Hellboy as a character, about Mike Mignola's original vision going back to the comic books and certainly through the first movie, is his complete affability, this kind of avuncular humanity that you get from Hellboy, which seems to be in conflict with his core essence. And certainly the first movie wants you to believe that it is in conflict with his core essence. The movie starts and ends with these ominous and portentous monologues about the nature of a man lies not in his origins, but in the decisions that he makes, in the way that he ends what he has begun, which, cool. Like, I'm actually philosophically in alignment with that notion. But that's not the movie that you're doing, guys. That's not the story that you're telling. This is not about Hellboy in conflict with his inner self. This is about Hellboy in conflict with a bunch of demons summoned by Nazis, because, it's still a comic book movie from 2004. So it's fun. It's a really great movie. A little weirdly misaligned, but I think misaligned in really interesting ways. So that podcast is going to go out over at Common Room Radio in probably about a couple of hours, I guess. I would say that. All right. Let me see here. Becca says, Ron does a lot of kind of scary dudes, Sons of Anarchy, but I love him in Hellboy. Also, if you're going to watch Hellboy, go watch Blade 2, which feels in so many ways like a direct template for Hellboy. There are so many actors in common, so many production technicians in common. It has a very similar kind of swagger to it. Blade 2, also just a great film. Yeah. Yes, of course. And Angela's remembering Ron Perlman starring in the Beauty and the Beast TV show, which I had completely forgotten about until it was brought up last night as a part of the discussion. It's really, really good and weird. Yes. Good. Let me see as I scroll back here. Yeah, Alexa says it only works in replay, but you can use it to find what the streamer was talking about when the comment was posted. Right, okay, yes, the timestamp issues, yes. Yeah, you know, we have the technology. We can do it. We can make this work. We can come up with a better broadcast technology. In so many ways, and this, I suppose, is the unifying thought that connects together so many different conversations that we've had over the course of the last few weeks about Twitter and about Crowdcast, about YouTube, about Patreon, certainly. In so many ways, it feels as though we who are... to say this with as much, utter uncomfortable humility as I can possibly summon, we who are in the vanguard of this digital revolution, right? All of us included, we who are kind of progressing this notion of direct digital distribution, of inclusive digital communities, the Dear Mr. Potter sessions and the There and Back Again sessions, and particularly this kind of meta session, which is about the production of digital content in and of itself. We're here gathered to talk about the conversations that we're going to have later in the week, right? All of this kind of stuff feels as though it's advancing and maturing in a really great direction at a really great rate. But the technology just isn't quite there. And there is no reason why the technology isn't there. As I said, over on Twitch, they've got the chat thing sorted out. There is a technical solution for that. Their chat overheads, technically speaking, their chat overhead is absolutely minimal, right? It doesn't take racks and racks more computers to make this work. It's just it's a question of sophistication. It's a question of an evolved and developmental platform. Crowdcast is intended for other things. Crowdcast is intended for, webinars and for business-to-business propositions, for sales meetings and for strategy meetings and things like that, which makes it not entirely perfect for our kind of format here, but not imperfect and a lot better than YouTube. We can do this. And I still firmly believe, and of course, talking about Patreon too, the way that Patreon changed its fee transaction, its transaction fee arrangements last week, the more I think about it, the more frustrated and irritated I get by it, honestly. It feels like a very cavalier decision that was foisted upon us, the Patreon creators, and obviously on you, the Patreon supporters. It's just not great. For those of you who perhaps missed this story, Patreon has realigned their structures for taking transaction fees from pledges. Previously, when you would pledge $1 to me, Patreon would take that dollar and pass like 80 cents on to me, and the rest would be their cut, and the cut for the credit card company or for PayPal or for Stripe or for whoever, right? Whoever was kind of processing the fee. That's fine. That's completely normal, business to business financial transaction stuff. That was just part, literally, it was the cost of doing business. Now Patreon has decided that instead what it is going to do when you pledge me $1 is take from you like $1.37 or $1.38 to cover that transaction fee. They have also raised that transaction fee, but they're going to take $1.37, $1.38 and pass to me 95 cents, which on the high level sounds great, right? On a superficial gloss, that sounds amazing. You pledge me $1, I used to get 80 cents, now I get 95 cents. That's amazing. Good, excellent. I get more money for my platform, so I can do this thing. But it's incredibly shady the way that it's been done. It's incredibly cynical the way that it has been marketed, the way that it has been rolled out. You guys are getting stung by this, and I completely understand your outrage. I am not happy with Patreon. As I've discussed a few times before, there are other ways of you pledging your support to Point North Media. You can head on over to paypal.me/PointNorthMedia and pledge any amount you like over there on whatever basis you see fit. Like, that can just happen. You can also head on over to coffee/PointNorthMedia. That's ko-fi.com/PointNorthMedia and pledge a couple of bucks there. That's a platform that's designed to take like small individual donations. It's literally you buy me a coffee, right? That's the idea, is that you can just pledge a couple bucks and buy me a coffee, and that'll get me through the day. Goodness knows it takes a lot of coffee to produce all the shows here at Point North Media. But of course, those solutions aren't real solutions. They aren't full-fledged, full-featured solutions, because Patreon allows me to do things that taking money from PayPal, taking money from coffee doesn't allow me to do. There isn't right now an easy way for me to take a pledge through PayPal and then make available to that person all of the Patreon exclusive stuff that I've put up over the course of the last year, which is now a lot of stuff. There's a lot of material on the Patreon page, which is great for people who support on Patreon, but not great for people who don't want to support on Patreon. One of the things that I'm doing over the Christmas break, I'll just kind of tease this for you guys. One of the things I'm doing over Christmas break is fundamentally changing how I post patron exclusive as opposed to Patreon exclusive content. There's going to be a new way for you guys to access all of that material if you choose to support Point North Media through some other means than Patreon. Nothing's going to change if you support on Patreon and these new fees don't bother you. That's completely fine. That's completely great. Thank you for that, firstly. Secondly, nothing is going to change over there. Everything will be just as it is. But some of that stuff, or all of that stuff, eventually will be cross-posted to other platforms so I can send out links directly. But that, of course, is going to have an administrative overhead. I've now got to, when I'm done with, say, the Point North Book Club at the end of every week, instead of just stripping the audio out and posting that separately for the podcast feeds, I now have to take that whole thing, take that video and post it somewhere, post it to YouTube in an unlisted fashion so that it's accessible to everyone who wants it. I've got to take the audio and put that somewhere. I don't even know where I'm going to put that, but I have to find a solution, some Google Drive repository or some Dropbox repository or SoundCloud or something so that you guys can get into it. But that's, another hour or two of work, which I've got to tell you, just looking at the math right now, yes, assuming that support on Patreon doesn't decline precipitously, it has declined a little. Obviously people are upset about the changes at Patreon. Assuming that Patreon support doesn't decline precipitously, I'm still going to be a little out of pocket because I'm spending so much more time on administrative functions here, which is frustrating, particularly because I was not consulted. We, as a community of creators over at Patreon, were not consulted. We are still at the behest, at the beck and call of the platforms that we use to distribute our digital content, and that's kind of shady. So it's an ongoing process, though. We look forward with hope, we look forward with optimism, we look forward with the firm belief that someone is going to come up with a better system and revise these things. And that's really the evolution of the internet, I think. Napster didn't die because of any of the oppositions to Napster, right? There was no legal injunction that could be placed upon Napster that actually killed it. Napster was a music sharing system back in the late 1990s, early 2000s, for the illegal sharing of music, I should emphasize here. And it damn near killed the music industry. Like, it was a terrible time to be a musician. It was a terrible time to try and make money off of music at that point because Napster was utterly ubiquitous, was utterly straightforward, and could be, so music could be shared freely. And there was a huge opposition from the music industry, from governments, from legislative bodies who wanted to shut down Napster, and they couldn't. You know what killed Napster in the end? iTunes. Because iTunes was more convenient. And it turns out that people like supporting content. People like paying for the content that they enjoy. Not everyone, okay, but most people. Most people enjoy paying for the content that they enjoy. iTunes killed Napster. Something will come along and provide a new broadcast platform for those of us who do these things. So I'm looking forward to that, whatever that may be. If I knew a little more about it, I would start it up myself. But unfortunately, my technical knowledge taps out about here, and this is a much more significant engagement here. Yeah, Alexa says, talking about the Patreon thing, it's super shady. Reading the email, they don't really lay out what it means that the price changed. It also lowers the number of shows people can support. It makes me sad. Yeah, it is very, very shady. This is absolutely the worst thing. If Patreon had come out in the middle of the week and said, hey, you guys, we've been valued at like $450 million and we're making no money. We're making no money. Like right now, running Patreon is a very tenuous proposition, right? It's not a straightforward thing to do at all. We need to increase our revenue, and we need to do that by coming to the creators, by coming to the patrons and charging more money. If they'd come out and just been honest about that, I feel as though the response would not have been so negative. There would have been a discussion, of course, and some people would have been outraged, and some people would have been upset, and some people would have been, prevented from giving as much, from pledging as much as they want to the creators that they like. That's just the economic reality of that, which really sucks. But here we are at the end of 2017. It's just been a tough year for everyone, But if Patreon had come out and said that, I think the outrage from the community would not have been as acute. It would not have been as pointed. Unfortunately, they handled their messaging really badly. Turns out that honesty is a very important thing. Art says, if we go through PayPal instead of Patreon, will we still have access to the Patreon book club? Yes. Some way, somehow, yes. There are, and when I say access to the book club, I mean access to the live book club discussions, which is actually fairly trivial. Again, there's an administrative kind of overhead there that I would have to sit and write emails and keep a list, and you know, I'd be spending a little more time in Google Docs through the course of the week. But yes, that can happen, and then also access to the recordings and to the audio track as well. Yeah, my intent is that however you pledge your support to Point North, whether you pledge your support on Patreon or PayPal or Coffee, or you send me a check in the mail, or you show up at my door with a bottle of scotch and a firm handshake, like any of these things should get you access. Like, I want this to be completely democratized because you guys are so incredibly generous in your support. Like, I know what it is to be on the edge, you know, economically speaking, financially speaking. I know that many of you are on fixed or limited incomes in some way, and the fact that you even consider supporting the creation of independent content on the internet is an astonishing and brilliant and beautiful thing, and nothing should prevent you from doing that. There should be as few obstacles as possible to you offering that support, to you extending that incredible generosity and altruism, you know, to help make more independent commentary on the internet. It's a great and valuable thing. And of course, I'm speaking as someone who obviously uses Patreon as a service, but I also pledge my support to a lot of different people on Patreon. This is stinging me too, right? I'm also feeling as though, well, I don't know, can I really give these $1 pledges to 10 or 12 or 15 different people? Maybe not. Maybe I need to limit that too. Maybe I need to rationalize that too. Or maybe I just need to eat that. Maybe I just need to decide that this is actually a transaction fee that's worth paying. It's not an easy proposition, not an easy proposition at all. So the idea is that I will come up with a system which will allow me to drop all of these barriers and blockades. So however you choose to support Point North Media, you will get access to everything that I do that is patron exclusive as distinct from Patreon exclusive. And there won't be anything that is Patreon exclusive that is not more generally patron exclusive, if that makes sense. And a lot of that is easy. You know, I use Crowdcast for the live chat, so I can just do an unlisted Crowdcast and share that link with you all, or we can do that on YouTube too. The audio feeds, as I say, that's a little more complicated. I'll need to come up with some kind of structure for that. It'll be some kind of obfuscated RSS feed, but there are a couple of solutions that might work for that. Things like the polls for determining the next book club, one of which is coming up at the end of this week. I'll just switch over to Google Forms, and we'll do it there instead of doing it on the Patreon infrastructure. And I'll link out from Patreon to that, and we'll just kind of use these distributed, more democratic platforms. That's the plan going forward. Wow, this got really deep into the weeds, you guys. I'm sorry. This is supposed to be a real lighthearted conversation about what we're doing at Point North this week. Let me see here as I catch up. Yeah, Napster. Yes, Drip. Yes, so Sundray is saying there is Drip, which is a terrible name. Yeah, it's also a terrible layout. Like, if you visit Drip, it's really ugly. It looks like remember that social media alternative that came out, gosh, was it last year? Ello, E-double-L-O, which was supposed to be, again, this open source, democratized, you know, privacy-oriented social media platform that went absolutely nowhere. We all rushed to it to sign up, and then the whole thing just, as far as I know, died. And no, actually, it is definitely still going, because I still get notification updates from Ello every week or two. Just a really ugly website. Like, you need a certain kind of a certain polish and a certain appreciation of design, I think, for these services to catch on. Drip is particularly complicated because Drip was a fairly successful crowdfunding platform that worked pretty much like Patreon. And then it was bought by Kickstarter and closed down. Now they have resurrected it. Now they have brought it back. It's invite only right now, but I will be paying close attention to Drip and seeing if that works too. But from now on, I am not going to engage with any crowdfunding platform that requires me to silo any of the content that I create. I do not want to be in a position, I will not be in a position where I sign up with Drip and people who pledge their support on Drip get access to special stuff that isn't available to anyone else. That is a fool's errand. So that's definitely not going to happen. Yeah, I just hope that this is going to... that it's going to be easy, and that I'm not going to spend all of my time navigating these different pledge things. Alexa says there's a great episode of Startup by Gimlet Media that talked about Groove Shark. I remember that episode. If you guys haven't heard the stuff coming out of Gimlet, it's extremely good. Reply All is, for my money, one of the very few podcasts that I think is absolutely necessary for a kind of robust digital literacy. I don't think that you can be truly literate on the internet and literate about digital culture unless you listen to Reply All. You certainly don't have to listen to every single episode, but most of them are going to have really great conversations about, gosh, security and privacy and digital culture and meme culture, and obviously the yes, yes, no game where PJ and Alex explain a tweet, a mysterious, cryptic, deliberately veiled tweet to their boss, Alex Bloomberg. Those segments are just fantastic. I heartily encourage you to check them all out. Good. Reply all, woot, says Angela. Good. Yes, as Alexa says, Gimlet Media is highly produced, but they make some amazing shows. They really do. Their digital production is just, their audio production is just really, really great. I really loved a Mystery Show with Starlee Kine. I think they only made 6 episodes of that show, maybe 8 episodes of that show. That was really, really good. I forget what I'm listening to. I should probably do our monthly catch-up with what podcasts I'm listening to. I just started listening to, let me see here. Yeah, I just started listening to a long-running podcast which has been recommended to me many, many times over called Hello from the Magic Tavern, which is a fantasy comedy improv podcast that comes out of Chicago. It's really, really good. The basic setup is that a podcaster has slipped through a magical portal into the mystical realm of Foon, which is like every D&D, handbook world that you've ever seen. And he has set up in the local tavern there, and he has podcast interviews with the people who come by. It's very silly. It's very absurd. It has a tendency, particularly in its first 3 episodes, to rabbit trail a little too hard, and it doesn't really have any kind of narrative through line, or at least no narrative through line that I have yet discerned, being maybe 15, 16 episodes into this show. But it is very funny. It is very imaginative and enormously affectionate too to the tropes and the conventions of fantasy storytelling, particularly that kind of D&D inflected fantasy storytelling. I'm scrolling down through my list here. Friends at the Table. Speaking of Patreon support, Friends at the Table is a actual play D&D, or not actually D&D, but an actual play role-playing podcast that I just started listening to with the beginning of their most recent arc, the arc that's just wrapping up right now. Right now they're doing a really huge sci-fi, anime-inflected, giant mecha kind of sci-fi adventure, which is just really great. Everyone involved in that show is very smart, very funny, very sensitive to the kind of collaborative storytelling aspect of role-playing games. I just love that. And it's Friends at the Table. Let me see. Are people recommending things? Becca says, can I recommend There Might Be Cupcakes, all about writing and life and living with chronic pain, just fantastic and heartfelt. I have never heard of There Might Be Cupcakes. Who produces that? That sounds amazing. Homecoming is fantastic, says Angela. Good. We're going to have, okay, so we're doing multiple recommendations here. I like this. I'm scrolling through. I don't think there's anything else that I've started listening to lately. I did catch up with, I just mentioned, Idle Thumbs in the context of watching video game streaming over at Twitch. The Idle Thumbs video game podcast has now dropped to, I think, once a month. They do one show per month, just talking about video games specifically, but they have launched as a replacement a really great show. They have launched, I think this was like a year ago, if not longer, but they launched a new show called Important If True, which is a roundtable discussion show where they talk about big ideas in, it's kind of difficult to pin down. It's big ideas in humanism and transhumanism and robots and artificial intelligence and like the bleeding edge of technology and all of these kind of big ideas of what culture is, what human beings are, and where culture and humanity is going in the very near future. It's very, very funny. Again, given to some rabbit trails, but I find the 3 guys who produce that podcast extremely charming. That's Chris Ramo, Jake Rodkin, and Nick Brecken. Really great podcast. So that's Important If True. So maybe we'll make that our recommendations for this week. That was Hello from the Magic Tavern, Friends at the Table, and Important If True. Go check those out, I guess, if you need more podcasts to fill everything up. Let me see what else we have here. Alexis is saying Travis was just on the first name terms. Travis McElroy of My Brother and Me and The Adventure Zone and Schmanners and God, a million other podcasts. Travis McElroy was recently on Hello from the Magic Tavern. I have not listened to that yet because I am compulsive and must listen to all of these things in order. So I will get to his episode in like a year from now. Where are we? Sci-Fi Double Feature recommends Becca Eller. They talk about really terrible old sci-fi movies so charming and done with so much love. That's fantastic. I have for so long wanted to do a bad movie podcast that isn't like snarky and critical, right? That doesn't fall into that trap of the idiot's wit. That instead is celebratory of things which are terrible but brilliant despite or because of their terribleness. I love that idea very much. That sounds excellent. Melissa is listening to Cantina Cast for Star Wars. Fun character dissections and reaction shows. It isn't the most academic, but an entertaining listen. Cantina Cast, good recommendation. Let me see here. So Sundari, Aaron recommends One Shot, which is another tabletop role-playing podcast by James D'Amato and friends. That's a really great podcast if you're into very short tabletop role-playing experiences. Friends at the Table, their most recent game has lasted a year. The adventures have lasted 2 years, 3 years. I don't even know how long. Their first arc lasted forever, but One Shot is very focused. You can dip in, have that ludic narrative experience, and then come back out, which is great. He also listens to the entire Chris Sims over. I am entirely with you on that, Aaron. We listen to Xeno Warrior Business and Sailor Business and War Rocket Ajax. And is that all of them that Chris Sims is currently engaged in? I think it might be, but they're all very, very good. Mabel is an intriguingly beautiful fiction podcast, says Angela. Mabel, I don't know Mabel. I'll need to check that out. And Alexis recommends And Sons podcast. It's a Christian podcast, but there are lots of just philosophical discussions that are great. I should recommend the Liturgists, I suppose, in that sense, who are going from strength to strength. It's just extraordinary, the work that the Liturgists are doing right now. It's, again, kind of Christian-inclined theological conversations that tend to spiral into broader philosophical conversations that are just accessible to everyone and gorgeously produced. Yeah. Okay, that's going to do it, you guys. I'm 40 minutes into my 30-minute podcast, so we're going to wrap it up there. Thank you all so much for being with me this morning. Let's go over the rundown again, just so that we know when everything is happening. Tomorrow night, Tuesday, December the 12th, Dear Mr. Potter 35, Light Defeats the Dark. That is at 10 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Central. Wednesday, Story and Star Wars, The Force Awakens live commentary. That is at 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central, although I should say it's actually at like 8:30 Eastern, 7:30 Central, because we're going to do a little pre-show where we just talk about Star Wars. But the actual movie commentary part is going to begin at 9 Eastern, 8 Central on Wednesday evening. That is over on YouTube. You won't find that in the Crowdcast links here, but you can check out the newsletter or check out the broadcast calendar. You'll find the link there to the YouTube page, or just head on over to youtube.com/PointNorthMedia, and you'll find the little bannered upcoming live event thing at the top there, assuming that is still there. YouTube keeps revising how they handle those pages, so I think that's still there. I think if you go to youtube.com/PointNorthMedia, you'll be able to see that. If not, there are a myriad of other ways to find it, and I will certainly tweet out the link to that. Thursday evening, 10 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Central, there and back again, 44 Gibbets and Crows, as we finally face down the wise fool Saruman. And then on Friday at 10 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Central, the Point North Book Club, Murder on the Orient Express, Part 3, for now, exclusive to Patreon supporters, but it will be available after the fact to people who pledge in other ways. I'm going to work that all out. That's my mission for this week. You guys, it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you, as it is every single time. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your enthusiasm. I hope to see you all throughout the week talking about Harry Potter and talking about Star Wars and talking about Tolkien and talking about all the other things that we discuss here at Point North Media. I will talk to you all again very soon. Oh, wait, there's a question. A question just dropped in here. A question from Karen. Have you read Ben Aranovic's Rivers of London series? Just finished the first book and I'm totally hooked. London-based police procedural with magic and local gods. Convergences with American gods, Potter, Earthsea, other Learning How Magic Works books. That's a really great subset. That's my favorite section of Barnes & Noble, is the Learning How Magic Works section. And also with the Bryant and May books, plus elements of the Adam-style dry absurdist humor. Karen, I have never heard of this. I would definitely check this out. Ben Aranovic's Rivers of London series. If there is a good, I think I have an Audible credit kicking around right now. So if there's a good audiobook version of that, I might go track that down right now. Thank you so much for the recommendation. I appreciate it. Anytime you guys want to recommend stuff to me, by the way, I love that. I do actually have an actual list that I keep with all of your recommendations. I'm going to work through it some fine day. I will stop podcasting so much, and then I'll be able to read some books. It's never going to happen, you guys. It's never going to happen. I'm always going to be podcasting. That'll do it for today, though. Have a great Monday. You guys go kick it in its ass and do wonderful things, and I will talk to you all again very soon. Until